So, welcome to the show, Daniel.
Hey, Sarah, it's great to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. I mean, when I was doing my research for the show, there was a lot that jumped out at me about you personally, about the business. There were things I'd never heard of before and things that really captured my attention. So, I'm really looking forward to this, and let's just dive right in. But before we really get into optimal dynamics, I want to talk about your journey a little bit because I think it's fascinating. You interned at Merrill Lynch, which is notoriously hard work. Then you worked on a research project at Princeton before founding Optimal Dynamics. So give us a glimpse into that journey and how and why you came to found the company.
Yeah, so when I was first in school, I more thought I wanted to be Gordon Gekko and thought that the Wall Street and econ route was the coolest thing ever. And as I learned more and more about sort of corporate finance, I became less and less interested. And towards the end of kind of my kind of formal education, I became interested in energy actually.
Hmm.
And so while I was, doing internships at Merrill Lynch and working there, I started getting into kind of the kind of economic aspect around how do you deal with energy and energy systems.
Right.
That led me into a lot of the work that my father was actually doing at the time, which was optimization and decision making around energy systems. Now his research lab had spent most of its career focusing in on logistics. How do you make
Hmm.
decisions over big, complex logistics and supply chain problems? And that's where we started to see sort of an inkling of an opportunity. And so we first started Optimal Dynamics because we knew logistics and supply chain was starting to gain a lot of data, and we had some really cool tools to implement. And it wasn't until mid to late 2017 where we thought that this could become a truly scalable software company. And so we sort of, I personally sort of backed into kind of where I am now, not intentionally, but through through realizing that being Gordon Gekko is much cooler in a movie, and then now we're optimizing trucks.
Which is awesome. I mean, I think that's really cool, but I'm kind of a supply chain nerd. I've been in supply chain for a very, very long time. But that's not really, a different story than most of us who got into supply chain because we either backed into it, we didn't jump into it necessarily with 2 feet until most recently,
Yep.
or we sort of fell into it, right? So backed into it, fell into it, what have you. That's a really great story. And it's interesting to bring energy and logistics together because you don't really, hear about that. So give us an overview before we get into the nitty gritty. What does Optimal Dynamics do? How do you help your customers?
Yeah, we are a decision intelligence company. So we focus today on helping logistics companies, specifically truckload operations, make better strategic and operational decisions.
Hmm.
So we help our customers make decisions, everything from how many trucks should they buy a year out, who are their best customers, down to automating decisions that they're making a week in advance in terms of what loads should they accept, all the way to, you know, should what driver should actually accept each load.
Oh,
And so
really?
we help the whole kind of continuous planning process of automating and optimizing decisions for logistics trucking operations. So we work with companies that all the way down to like a 50 truck middle market operation, all the way to some of the largest for hire fleets in the nations and some very robust private fleets as well.
I like that. So you're, thinking about the present and a couple of hours out, but then you're also helping them think about the future and a year from now based on the data that you're collecting.
That's exactly right. We don't view solving these problems as, just viewing like solving one link in the chain. A
Right.
lot of the focus to date has been down on that nitty gritty day of decision. Okay, does, Frank or Sarah or John take this load? But once you're already making that decision, the game has already been set.
Right.
You're already working with your customers. Your drivers have already been hired. The rates have already been set. The tenders and contracts have already been sort of built. You've already accepted the loads. And so at that point, most of the control is out of your hands and you're really solving kind of for the scraps.
Hmm.
But when if you have systems that can not only, handle the higher level strategic kind of foundational level, but through the entire links of the chain of making decisions, we can get a lot of compounding effects. We
Hmm.
can make sure our rates are set and our contracts are correct and our drivers in the right place. We can make sure that on a dynamic basis, we're accepting the right loads and freight into our business. And then when it comes time to actually execute, we can do that in the most efficient way. But we view this as a really a kind of like an entire holistic decision rather than just, which driver takes which load. Because once again,
So,
at that point, it's sort of out of your control.
yeah, you keep mentioning that about which driver takes which load. Like, what difference does that make for companies? How important is that decision?
It's important, but for purchasing technology, if you were just doing that, it sometimes doesn't make sense.
Right.
Drivers have to be handled properly. We need to make sure we can get through a lot of nuanced data quickly. But in terms of driving that ROI, if you go in only solving that problem,
Hmm.
you're going to be disappointed.
Right.
But
But
if you can,
it is an important part of the decision making platform and software that you're looking to buy. Is
it is incredibly important.
okay.
It's just sort of the last link of the chain. So
Okay.
yes, with the weakest link, sort of the system breaks. But if that's the only link you're playing with, it's not going to drive the impact that you're looking for.
Right.
But if you can solve the kind of higher level links of the foundational and tactical decisions that you're making, these are the biggest drivers where we see about 80% of the impact within our customer
Wow.
base. If you can set those, the dispatching that day of execution is sort of what brings it over the finish line. So
Okay.
yes, it's important, but if you're only thinking about getting over the finish line and not actually doing the whole race,
Yeah, yeah.
it's not going to pan out exactly as you like. And so that's why we
Okay.
think about the whole problem holistically with one tool and really break down those barriers between planning and execution, because there's just a lot of compounding effects that we believe a lot of our customers, you know, haven't really realized. They haven't actually asked the questions or seen the ROI potential from looking at their problem in a much more wide spectrum.
Yeah, but knowing that that's part of the solution as well is, really nice to know when you're looking at working with somebody like an optimal dynamic. So, before we go any further, can you explain core.ai to us? It's complex and I know there's a lot of research that sits behind it, but just break it down for us. What is core.ai and how does it work? What is it facilitating?
Yeah, so Core AI is our underlying engine behind the Optimal Dynamics platform. And it is the building block of almost 40 years of research and development to help make decisions in uncertain environments. And so that is what it is. It's an advanced, basically what we call high dimensional AI platform for making decisions. Now, it is a bit of an iceberg. All of this, in terms of what OD does, is that this sits underneath the application. This isn't
Right.
a big, scary tool that our customers are going to have to learn and hire engineers for. The fact that this system can learn, can adapt, can, you know, uh, think a little bit like a human does and drive these efficiencies, it means when a human gets involved in the product, they're dealing with decisions and not statistics. They're seeing
Right.
action items and not guidance. And so it means that we can take that final step and not just, provide a lot of statistics and ad hoc reports and complex dashboards, but we can provide, actionable decisions that are, basically solved, and then allow humans to manage exceptions and deal with relationships. And so Core AI is the brain that sits behind OD, and it's what makes us unique in terms of the decisions that we can drive and what we can optimize for our customers.
Well, that's really fascinating. I mean, there's a lot here that I'm kind of hearing for the first time. And just before we move on, can you give us a picture of AI in logistics right now? What's happening versus what we think is happening? Because in my research, you say that only 1% of AI initiatives in logistics make it into full production. And that's a bit of a crazy stat considering we are talking about this at conferences, industry conferences and webinars, things like that. So it almost seems like people are using AI technology more than they actually are. And I think the reality is that if we had better AI technology in place, we could avoid billions of dollars of waste throughout global logistics. Is that right? Talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, and that comes from a report that wasn't that's not an OD statistic. That is an industry report.
Mm,
I think first the important thing is to not use AI as one shiny sort of Terminator like hammer.
right.
It's a box of math. It's a box of math strategies to allow computers to learn and make
Okay.
decisions. And so it isn't this big scary thing. However, what you do unfortunately see within industry is a lot of hand waving. You see a lot of hand waving because it sells and it sounds good. And the industry went through some ups and downs. Using AI, you at some point kind of just get a little bit laughed at because many companies were using this as marketing, not as actual tools
Right.
to solve. And so I think when we talk about our applications, we don't use it as a crutch. We just view it as one component of our tool to help companies make decisions. And there's a
Right.
lot of areas in our application that don't use any AI or any machine learning to drive decisions. And so for us, we use very unique artificial intelligence approaches for parts of our application where it makes sense. But it is not, who we are and the only thing that the platform does. It is just a tool. And I think if more people viewed AI as just a bucket of different algorithmic approaches, it becomes less scary and people can maybe talk about it a little bit more in an educated way and actually ask the questions when providers say, hey, we use machine learning. They don't look at it as, oh, everyone has the same type of machine learning. And they say, oh, how do you use it? What do you use it for? How does it drive decisions? And so unfortunately, over many years, you saw just a lot of hand waving and sort of academically isolated AI approaches that weren't tested in production. And
Yeah.
specifically, when you hit logistics, it's a very uncontrolled environment that has a lot of messy attributes and messy data. And
Hmm.
so, getting these toolboxes and tool sets to actually work in the real world and what is a very messy real world is one of the reasons that we benefit from almost 4 decades of lineage solving these problems.
Right.
This wasn't something that a couple of college kids in a dorm room could solve in a couple of years. This was a lot of work that I can't take personally all the credit for, but an amazing world leading team did, knocking their heads on a whiteboard for quite a long number of decades to solve in a proper way.
Well, it's a very complex and unique industry, that's for sure. And I love the fact that you shared some of the questions that we should be thinking about when we're in front of providers to really find out if they are the right provider for us, right? And so, do you see people getting more used to the idea of AI and, sort of embracing it a little bit more?
I think they do. I think, even if they're not educated, and this is something that we spend a lot of time when we interact with our prospects, is you know, it's something that they know they should have. It's something that they know they should be looking into. And asking the right questions helps.
Right.
Even if you're not fully educated, just asking the right sort of list of questions can press on a provider to, answer the responses. And if you're fairly kind of thoughtful, you'll know if the responses are just hand waving or if they're accurate.
Right.
One thing that we've done as a company is we've empathized that this stuff is new.
Hmm.
Not everyone knows exactly what it means and what does it mean for them. And so something that we've done in terms of working with prospects is not charge them a dime to get started, but use their actual data within our platforms and being able to see kind of the decisions that we would have made. Because at the end of the day, AI, machine learning, all of these buzzwords, they don't mean anything. The only thing that really matters is what decisions are we actually going to help them out with. And
Hmm.
so seeing data paired with buzzwords actually turn into robust decisions with an ROI, that's what they care about. And so we, empathize, we invest into every prospect to educate them about, what does this type of technology mean for them? And that's been, very helpful for our prospective customers and our current customers who, you know, maybe just start saying, I don't know what I'm actually looking at now, but I
Yeah.
know that I should be talking about it. I know I should be learning. And that's a very, robust process to kind of educate themselves quickly on, what does AI mean for, a trucking company. And so
Hmm.
we think
And
that's
you, and you
important.
You put your money where your mouth is. I love that. So let's take a closer look at the product then and dive into how it can help us with our day to day operations. Let's start with load planning and dispatch. What is particularly important given the current disruption?
Yeah. So we have three modules: a strategic tool, a tactical tool, and a dispatching tool. And as I mentioned, they all work together. So for load planning and dispatching, these really focus on our more operational tools. So these are tools that are used day in and day out. Um, for load planning, that goes into our tactical load planning application. And this is all about making decisions up to 2 or 3 weeks into the future, specifically on, can I accept this freight into my network? And
Okay.
also for the growing number of brokerage operations out there, can I move this load with my assets? Or maybe this is a good fit for my brokerage team. And so that makes that decision not only in an automated way, but in an optimized and resilient fashion. We
Mm.
understand that there's dozens of different possibilities of what might happen in 2 weeks. Things will go wrong. That's the only certainty in logistics, is that things will go wrong. And so we can still, with all of that noise, with all the uncertainties that these companies deal with on a daily basis, we can go ahead and respond to a tender 10 days out and figure out if it's going to work for us. And so if it's not going to good fit for our fleet, maybe we can still respond to the customer and say, yes, we have you covered, but we can start looking for third party capacity today and not 2 hours before pickup. And so that's a little bit of our load tendering application. It's sort of proactive responses to business that enters into your operation. On our dispatching, this is a little bit more clear cut. What driver takes the right load, and helping with that optimized and automated decision. And as issues arise within the network, and while we try to plan to avoid these, how are we going to respond? Truck drives off the road, truck is late. Who now needs to pick up that next load because our plans have changed?
Right.
And so when we think of our plans, we think of resilient, self-healing operations. Resilient comes from planning for uncertain environments, making decisions that work in almost every situation. Self-healing is having applications that realize, even if we make plans that work 95% of the time, that 5% of the time is going to happen, and we need to be able to respond to it quickly. And
Hmm.
so we think of all these applications as resilient. We try to make decisions that work in almost every possibility, even if things go wrong. But if things really go wrong, also having the tools that help us respond quickly to those issues.
So important. And I think, planning and visibility helps in real optimization and strategization. So let's turn to visibility then, because
Sure.
you've got a product called Future Visibility. And the insights that visibility brings to us has to be one of the most important things in supply chain right now. And everybody's kind of talking about it. If we're talking about a buzzword, I think that's a buzzword. How does that work with Optimal and with Core? Dot AI to really bring that true optimization?
Yeah, visibility has been a great achievement over the last year. So a company like Project 44 and Four Kites allowing for wide adoption of visibility
Right.
of operations. Future visibility is a sort of a key name for a feature that we have, and it really embodies kind of what the application does. Most of the decisions that we make are not for here and now. It's not, is this truck 12 minutes delayed? It's, what are the decisions that we can make tomorrow, the next day, a week into the future? So future visibility allows us to make those resilient decisions. It allows us to respond to, as freight comes in a robust and accurate way, so that we are confident that we've made a good decision, even if it's days and days into the future. Think of it a little bit like a weather forecast. It also allows you to proactively find issues with your network.
Hmm.
So we have a tool that's called our tactical procurement tool that shows you where proactive gaps are going to lie within your network.
Hmm.
So in 4 days, if we have a shortage of freight in Mississippi, it'll provide that information. It'll let you know that you're 4 loads short and that you're going to have drivers sitting around if you don't cover that. And that sort of proactive nature within the application, it sort of encompasses what we think of as future visibility. And so this is going beyond of that critical information of where your truck is today, but starting to think about the next step of what's going to happen tomorrow, the next day, a week down into the future.
Yeah, and it sounds like that helps with collaboration internally, right? Because we're talking about operations, but then you're talking about sales. Because if you don't have four loads in the next couple of days and you've got to go find those loads, that does bring in sales. It could bring in marketing, it could bring in the customer experience team. And so that kind of brings everybody together.
It does, and it gives you the only attribute we can't manage is time, right? It
Right.
gives you time to make decisions. We love our logistics colleagues, and they have quite a few number of bar stories about how they found a truck in 2 hours, and probably paid three times more than they wanted to.
Hmm.
We're trying to avoid that. If they had the decision a day or 3 days, they could collaborate with their teams. They could figure out freight that fits well for their network, not just a band aid, and they can make these decisions before kind of they get all their bar stories. And so while we may be reducing the number of bar stories that these guys are going to have, we do allow them to have extra time in their decisions and allow them to collaborate and work together. And I think that's actually a lot of what we think about the platform. We get in, is this going to automate everything? And our focus is that you know logistics is like the world's biggest chess game, and humans are really terrible at chess for the most part. And so yes, we're going to automate the 90% of decisions that humans are terrible at and we can't do well, but we're going to give more time to the things that you guys neglect daily, to collaborate with human beings, to work with your customers, to find business. And we think that's going to drive sort of uncalculable impacts to these companies versus just optimizing for profits and costs.
Yeah, and if the biggest challenge that we have is, what stories are we going to talk about over a drink? I mean, that's not a bad challenge to have. But let's talk about integration because it's one of the most asked questions when people are considering onboarding a new technology, right? Management is just thinking, how long is this going to take me? How hard or disruptive is this process going to be? How much time are you taking away from my IT team? So, what does that look like with Optimal?
Yeah, so there's a couple different paths here. So first, our three applications are almost all bought together, and we roll them out in a sequence. So we can get going with a company with no integrations. Just one Excel file. If you can run a POC with OD, you can get up and running on our tools with no integrations. And this starts to allow you to ask, the what if questions you've always been asking. It allows you to respond to bids and contracts. As you deploy the operational systems that are helping with the automation and daily, we have really two avenues. If you're on one of our pre-integrated tech partners, it makes it really streamlined, and OD does the entire onboarding process. If you're using a custom system you built in house, or if you're a large enterprise that has a lot of customizations, we have a great integrations team that has a flexible data layer that allows almost any data format and any data structure to kind of connect to our platform. And so there's a couple different ways to hook up with OD, and we remember always have this phased approach so we can get going and start driving insights with almost no or minimal IT resources from our customers.
Amazing. And I know that the audience is kind of probably a sigh of relief. That sounds so good, right? Because a lot of times with that integration, it's such a big concern. But before we move on to the last few questions, I wanted to ask you about your unique perspective because when I was doing research for the show, there was something that stood out to me, particularly in comparison to other tech companies in the market. Other companies call themselves innovators, but you talk about learning and education. It's a subtle difference, but I think it's a very, very big difference. So, what does that distinction mean to you? How does it set you apart?
Yeah, we kind of view that education is part of our DNA here. We are an academic company that came from academic roots, and continually learning is kind of what made us to who we are.
Hmm.
And so, we view that robust learning and impact is going to eventually drive innovation, but just innovating to innovate isn't kind of who we are. So we are always learning as a company. We do academic courses internally, led by some great people and academics on our side. And so it's just an integral part. And so anyone who comes in the company has to be eager to learn. They have to be eager to learn things that are out of their comfort zone. And we get a lot of employees who join us who turn down kind of the big flashy jobs at the big tech companies, because this is an opportunity to learn some really unique items. And they take that and drive what is kind of products that will innovate on their own. And so we don't view us as just a Silicon Valley company that's disrupting X, Y, and Z. We
Mhm.
view us as the continuation of decades of learning that we're now just deploying to market in a kind of consumable way.
Yeah, and people turning down those opportunities and coming to work for you is just a testament to your leadership and your leadership team and how you've created that corporate culture, which is really, really important. People want to work for a company where they can make an impact not only in their own lives, right, their personal lives, but also for the company and, in society as well. And so I think you're doing a great job with that. So let's get into your ideal client. You kind of mentioned it at the beginning, but I just want to hone in a little bit more as to, if I'm sitting in the audience and I'm thinking, this is really awesome and exactly what I need, I just want to get an idea of whether I'm going to be an ideal client for you.
Sure. So you may hear OD about becoming the decision layer of logistics and supply chain. That's sort of how we frame our company. But today, one of our core focuses, and basically our key core focus, is improving operations and decisions for logistics and trucking companies. So
Mhm.
our ideal clients and customers are companies with full truckload networks that range from typically around 50 assets all the way to the largest enterprises in the world, and then also retail and consumer goods companies who are owning and managing private fleets, or in some cases if they closely manage their dedicated fleet, there's opportunities for us to get involved there as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And now it's time for the case study. Everyone knows I love this one. So I'm excited at the thought of what you might have to share. So bring this discussion to life for us. What was one of your customers' core challenges? And what was the impact or ROI of utilizing your solution?
Yeah, so because we're so focused today, a lot of our customers have pretty consistent operational problems, and it's they do run their business today. you know their business still works today, but there's a lot of area of improvement. There's a lot of juice to squeeze. Some of our most exciting case studies come on two sides, which is one, the proof that the decisions are working, and two, the ROI. So
Hmm.
on one side of the decisions are working, we've hit north of what we call 95% compliance on the software. So
Ooh,
this means 95% of the decisions go through and are implemented without any edits.
wow.
And we're starting to near 100% in isolated cases with our customers, which is sort of the dream. Allow the operational decisions to be driven by the platform, and allow the humans to work on those human issues that computers are we'll call decades away from actually reasonably solving. Um, and then on the ROI, we've been able in some cases to drive profits by 20 to 30%
Wow.
for our customers. And so we've been able to really drive impactful ROI that's down to the accounting statements for some of our early customers, which is really exciting.
Yeah. And sounds like they're going to be really happy. Those are high numbers.
They're high
Congratulations.
numbers. Yeah, our job is to make sure that we can keep doing it over and over again. So we invest a lot into our teams, our deployment teams, our engineering teams, so that every customer of every shape and size and type and color, you know, can use the tool, and it's not just isolated for a select few companies. And so
Right.
a lot of the work that we do is making sure that no matter what your company looks like or how it operates, is that you can leverage our tools in what it should be a straightforward way, and hopefully get impactful, repeatable impact from the application that is what we believe material,
Mhm.
not just a percentage bump here or there, but a fundamental shift in terms of how decisions are made, which start to add up.
Yeah,
And so
well,
that's
I
what
can't
we're
believe
looking
we're
at.
at the last question. So my final question to you is, what does the future hold for Optimal Dynamics? What can we expect to see from you?
Sure. While we can't unveil everything, you will see two things. One, us continually investing into our customers on our core product, and growing a lot. So our company is almost doubling, tripling in size every single year. We're really scaling out our operations, and I think we have a lot of exciting downstream applications for general logistics and supply chain. So OD was started to be the decision layer of logistics and supply chain, and we're going to be focusing at that. So we're not going to be the next marketplace. We're not going to be the next widget. but we are going to hopefully spread our application as far and wide as we can throughout logistics and supply chain to help every company make better decisions.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. And I am so energized by this conversation. Over the last couple of years, we've talked so much about disruption and challenges and obstacles, and quite rightly so, because it's helped to highlight a lot of areas that as an industry, we can improve on. And you can only improve in the future if you reflect on where you've been. But it's been so refreshing today to be reminded of the potential, the huge potential to be found within logistics. It's exciting to have conversations around the positives of AI and how that's woven into decades of hard work and dedication by people who are so visionary in what they can see for our industry. I really think that this conversation will have given our listeners a lot to think about and perhaps maybe changed a few perspectives. If you want to find out more, you can check out Optimal Dynamics at optimaldynamics.com. A massive thanks to Daniel for joining me and to the team at Optimal Dynamics for making this episode happen. Thanks so much, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks so much. Had a blast.